You ever watch someone walk into a room like they own the place, only to get absolutely wrecked before they even sit down? That's exactly what just happened. On live TV, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't just call out Elon Musk and Donald Trump. She demolished them. No yelling, no theatrics, just facts, fire, and one mic drop moment after another. One of the world's richest men and one of the country's most controversial politicians both thought they could coast on charisma and clout. But Crockett? She came prepared with receipts, with purpose, and with the kind of energy that turns a congressional hearing into a viral takedown. And just wait until you hear what set her off. Because the moment Musk started making wild claims about government spending and Trump tried to flex his so-called business genius, Crockett didn't just respond, she unloaded. And the fallout? Let's just say Musk and Trump didn't see it coming. But that was only the beginning. It all started with one of the strangest, most baffling claims ever made during a government hearing. Elon Musk, tech mogul, billionaire entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed defender of truth, stepped into the spotlight and, with full confidence, accused the U.S. government of using taxpayer money to send condoms to Gaza. That's not a metaphor, not a misquote. That was the actual claim. In a moment that felt more like a fever dream than a serious political discussion, Musk essentially tried to rebrand himself as a whistleblower, someone exposing hidden corruption. But instead of revealing fraud or waste with any real evidence, he made a claim so outrageous, so completely unsubstantiated, that the entire room went quiet. For a moment it was hard to tell if he was joking, confused, or simply reading conspiracy theories off the internet. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't confused. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't roll her eyes or dismiss it as some billionaire trying to go viral. No, she took a deep breath, looked Musk in the metaphorical eye, and let the facts do the talking. She pointed out what no one else seemed willing to say in that moment, that this wasn't just a wild accusation, it was a dangerous distraction. At a time when real people are suffering, when real resources are needed, Musk chose to shift the spotlight to an imaginary scandal that, frankly, sounded like it was ripped from a low-quality meme page. And here's where Crockett flipped the script. She exposed the hypocrisy behind the accusation. Because while Musk was busy accusing others of misusing government funds, he was actively benefiting from some of the largest federal contracts handed out in recent years. We're talking hundreds of millions, sometimes billions, in government support for SpaceX, Tesla, and other ventures. And yet, here he was, pretending to be the watchdog for fiscal responsibility. Crockett didn't just stop at pointing out the contradiction. She called it for what it was, a grift disguised as outrage. A billionaire using his platform to throw out distractions while quietly collecting checks from the very system he claimed to be policing. She calmly reminded the public that if you're truly concerned about government waste, you start with audits, not with tech CEOs. You look at numbers, not Twitter threads. And you certainly don't accuse your own government of bizarre, unverifiable actions without presenting a single piece of credible evidence. Musk's attempt to hijack the conversation wasn't just reckless, it was revealing. It showed how easily misinformation can be weaponized when it comes from someone with enough money, enough followers, and just enough arrogance to believe that being loud equals being right. And the way Crockett handled it? Surgical. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply exposed the lie for what it was and made it impossible for anyone in that room or watching at home to ignore. But that was just the beginning, because while Elon Musk may have fired the first shot with his outrageous claim, Jasmine Crockett wasn't done. Not even close. After exposing Elon Musk's wild condom conspiracy for what it was, an attention-hungry distraction, Jasmine Crockett didn't slow down. She leaned in further, zeroing in on the cracks in the myth Musk had spent years carefully building. Because when you strip away the memes, the headlines, and the fanboy worship, what's left is a trail of overpromises, underperformance, and an empire that looks a lot less impressive when the smoke clears. She started with the crown jewel, Tesla. To the public, Tesla represents innovation, clean energy, progress. But Crockett pulled back the curtain to show a reality far more complicated. Recalls are now routine. The very vehicles Musk built his reputation on have been called into question. Cars spontaneously combusting in driveways, software glitches causing steering issues, and an autopilot system that seems to work better in theory than on the road. In one hearing, Crockett cited incident reports where Teslas had driven straight into emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, parked police cruisers. And Musk's response? A tweet storm, a shrug, maybe a meme or two. For a man who constantly claims to be revolutionizing transportation, he sure seems allergic to accountability. Then she moved on to SpaceX, Musk's rocket-fueled passion project and the one part of his empire that's often portrayed as untouchable. But even there, Crockett dug in. Yes, rockets launched, but at what cost? Failed missions, missed timelines, and a business model that survives largely because of lucrative government contracts. If SpaceX is soaring, it's because taxpayer money gave it wings. And the irony, Musk spends half his time mocking the same government that keeps his empire alive. And then came the social media takeover, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Crockett didn't mince words. Musk's handling of X was described as digital arson. He bought the platform for billions, walked in like a wrecking ball, and fired most of the people who knew how to keep the lights on. What was once a messy but essential hub for public conversation turned into a breeding ground for misinformation, harassment, and erratic policy changes that seemed more like whims than strategy. She highlighted the absurd contradictions. Musk, the so-called free speech absolutist, suspending journalists who dared to report critically on him. Musk, the anti-establishment crusader, suddenly cozying up to far-right influencers and amplifying their talking points to millions. He didn't democratize speech, he privatized outrage, but Crockett wasn't just focused on Musk's failures. She was focused on who those failures hurt. She brought receipts showing how Musk's reckless decisions weren't just embarrassing, they were dangerous. Layoffs at Twitter had left major gaps in election security and platform moderation. Tesla workers reported injuries and pressure to meet production deadlines at any cost. And SpaceX? Concerns had been raised about workplace culture and safety protocols being ignored in the rush to deliver results. She made it clear, Elon Musk's empire isn't being threatened by critics. It's being undone by Musk himself. And perhaps the most damning point of all? Crockett reminded the public that for someone so obsessed with innovation, Musk seemed awfully stuck in the same tired playbook: overpromise, underdeliver, and then blame the backlash on the media, the left, or the haters. It's a strategy, sure, but it's also a cover. Because if Elon Musk really had the answers, if he really had the genius he's credited with, he wouldn't need to constantly shift the narrative. He wouldn't need distractions. He wouldn't need to tweet like a conspiracy theorist or posture like a martyr. He'd let the results speak for themselves. But the truth is, results don't lie. And right now, they're exposing a man whose empire is built more on perception than performance. Crockett connected the dots for viewers, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Musk isn't under attack because he's a disruptor. He's under pressure because the disruption he's causing is starting to harm people, and the mask is slipping. But Crockett wasn't finished, because if Musk's fall from grace was a slow-motion car crash, what came next was a full-blown political demolition. Donald Trump was about to take center stage, and Jasmine Crockett came just as prepared. If Elon Musk's empire looked like it was built on ambition and unraveling under scrutiny, Donald Trump's story was a cautionary tale of illusion, one where smoke, mirrors, and marketing replaced accountability, ethics, and long-term success. And Jasmine Crockett didn't waste a second peeling back the gold-plated facade. When she turned her attention to Trump, there was no need for dramatics. The facts did all the heavy lifting. This wasn't about politics or partisanship. This was about a man who had spent decades selling the image of a billionaire genius while quietly racking up one humiliating financial collapse after another. Crockett began with one of the most humiliating chapters in Trump's financial saga, the casino fiasco. Trump Taj Mahal, once branded as the eighth wonder of the world, ended in bankruptcy. Not because the concept was bad, not because the market was hostile, but because Trump, once again, borrowed big, overpromised, and mismanaged everything. In a business where the odds literally favor the house, Trump still found a way to lose, and that set the tone for everything that followed. From there, Crockett rolled through the hall of failures like she was reading from a bankruptcy court transcript. Trump Airlines, gone. Trump Vodka, a liquor line that couldn't sell in a liquor-loving country. Trump Magazine? Folded. Trump Mortgage? Launched right before the housing crisis. Trump Steaks? Sold through a mail-order electronics store. Seriously. Each failed brand wasn't just a flop. It was a reflection of Trump's business strategy. Get attention, slap his name on something, cash in, and vanish when the bills came due. It wasn't entrepreneurship. It was opportunism with a spotlight. And then came Trump University, one of the most infamous scams in modern business history. Marketed as a place where everyday Americans could learn from the billionaire himself, it ended in lawsuits, heartbreak, and a $25 million settlement. Students were left with worthless certificates, while Trump walked away richer, never accepting responsibility for what was essentially a bait-and-switch scheme. Crockett didn't have to exaggerate. These were facts, public records, court documents, testimonies. But what she did do was connect the dots. She showed that Trump's business disasters weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern. Failed ventures followed by finger-pointing, denials, and strategic disappearances. But it wasn't just about financial mismanagement, it was about trust. Trump has always claimed to be a master deal-maker. He promised the best people, the best plans, the best everything. Yet over and over what he delivered was chaos. His businesses folded. His investors lost millions. His employees were left unpaid. And when it all came crashing down, he blamed the economy, the media, the system, anyone but himself. Crockett made it clear. If Trump's business record were held to the same standard as an average American entrepreneur, he wouldn't be celebrated. He'd be banned from ever running a company again. She even highlighted the way Trump used bankruptcy laws to his advantage, gaming the system that others couldn't afford to manipulate. While everyday Americans lose homes, pensions, and stability for one financial misstep, Trump walked away from bankruptcy court with fresh loans and another business idea waiting in the wings. He wasn't punished. He was rewarded for failing upward. And yet, this was the man who told the country he alone could fix it. The man who claimed he had a plan for everything: health care, taxes, jobs, infrastructure. Jasmine Crockett reminded the audience that nearly none of those plans materialized. The health care plan never came. Infrastructure Week became a national joke. And draining the swamp somehow ended with more indictments and chaos than any administration in recent memory. But the most brutal moment came when she pointed out how Trump turned his failures into a brand, and how the public for years bought into it. She looked directly into the camera and said, "He's not a builder, he's a seller, and what he's selling is a fantasy." That line hit like a freight train. Because Trump's story isn't just about failed companies. It's about what happens when image replaces substance, when style replaces accountability, when a man who repeatedly proves he can't manage his own businesses is somehow handed the reins of an entire nation. Crockett closed the section not with a personal attack, but with a question every viewer couldn't ignore. If Donald Trump can't make a steak company work, why would you trust him with a democracy? And with that, she pivoted. No pause, no breath. Because while Trump and Musk might dominate headlines with distractions and drama, Crockett was busy doing something they never could, holding power to account and refusing to let the spectacle overshadow the truth. By the time Jasmine Crockett finished exposing Donald Trump's catastrophic business record, the room was already unsettled. But her next target wasn't about failure, it was about something far more dangerous: unchecked power. Because while Trump had at least gone through an election, however divisive, Elon Musk was a different story entirely. No campaign, no votes, no confirmation hearings, no official role. Yet somehow, this man was operating at the highest levels of influence, silently, indirectly, and with almost no oversight. And Crockett wasn't about to let that slide. She started with a simple but devastating question. How does someone with zero security clearance end up controlling conversations that impact national defense? It wasn't hypothetical. She was referring to Musk's control over the Starlink satellite network, an infrastructure so powerful, so deeply integrated into international communications and military operations that the Pentagon had reportedly relied on it in real-time scenarios. And who made the final call in some of those situations? Not the president, not a military general, not a democratically appointed official. It was Elon Musk. One man, a tech billionaire with no formal authority, no chain of command, no accountability structure, And yet there he was, making calls that could shift the balance in international conflicts. Crockett didn't need theatrics to make the room uncomfortable. The facts spoke louder than any slogan ever could. She explained how, under any normal standard, someone with that level of access would be subjected to rigorous vetting. Intelligence briefings, background checks, financial disclosures, loyalty reviews. They'd have to prove they weren't compromised by foreign influence, by financial entanglements, by personal motives. But Musk? He bypassed every gate. And it wasn't just Starlink, it was SpaceX. It was Tesla. It was the growing web of defense and energy contracts Musk was quietly winning. Contracts worth billions, funded by taxpayer dollars, while Musk publicly played the role of anti-establishment rebel. Crockett called it what it was, a modern-day loophole in democracy. She said, "When unelected billionaires start having more power than cabinet officials, more access than senators, and more control than the people we actually vote for, that is when democracy begins to rot from the inside." And she didn't stop there. She turned to the hiring and firing practices Musk had implemented within Twitter, Tesla, and his other companies. She highlighted reports of sudden purges, firings based on political opinion, and even speculation that personal loyalty mattered more than professional merit. Imagine a person with that kind of mindset influencing how government contracts are awarded or how information is allowed to spread across the most powerful platforms in the world. Crockett pointed out that Musk didn't just own a social media company, he now had the means to shape global narratives. Twitter, rebranded as X, wasn't just a playground for free speech anymore. Under Musk's control, it had become a megaphone for whatever he wanted the public to believe. Whether it was about elections, wars, or his own critics, that kind of control, she warned, wasn't just reckless. It was strategic. Because when you can decide who gets heard and who gets silenced, you control more than just the conversation. You control the culture. She didn't make accusations, she made observations. She noted the way Musk had selectively amplified certain ideologies while suppressing others, the way his platform had been flooded with misinformation following policy changes, the way critics were suspended while allies were promoted, and all of it under the guise of freedom. But freedom, Crockett reminded the audience, comes with responsibility. She made it clear that no one is arguing Musk doesn't have talent, or that his innovations haven't changed industries. What she was arguing fiercely, unapologetically, was that brilliance doesn't excuse a lack of accountability. And in this case, brilliance had become a shield for power consolidation that no citizen ever voted for. Then came the question that sucked the air out of the room. If Elon Musk is allowed to influence military operations, government policy, and public discourse without ever being confirmed or vetted, then what's stopping the next billionaire from doing the same thing? No one had an answer, because this wasn't about Elon Musk the person. It was about the precedent. It was about a system where the richest man in the world can walk into rooms full of elected officials and be treated like a peer when he's not bound by the same rules, not subject to the same ethics, not accountable to the same people. That's not brilliance, that's structural failure. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words had the weight of someone who wasn't just challenging a man. She was challenging a system that allowed money to override merit and connections to outrank qualifications. And as her voice echoed through that chamber, you could feel the discomfort ripple through everyone listening. Because deep down, even Musk's defenders knew she was right. And if that wasn't enough, she still had more to expose. Because while Musk was operating behind the curtain, Jasmine Crockett was about to shine a light on the contradictions that made his influence not just questionable, but wildly hypocritical. After exposing Elon Musk's lack of qualifications and unchecked access to national power, Jasmine Crockett turned to something even more uncomfortable, something that made even the most die-hard defenders of Musk squirm in their seats. Because while Musk constantly brands himself as the anti-establishment outsider, the man taking on bloated government systems and fighting for the little guy, Crockett exposed the truth behind the persona. Elon Musk isn't standing against the system. He's feasting off it. And Crockett didn't just say it. She proved it. She walked the audience through a timeline that Musk himself would probably rather forget. One filled with taxpayer-funded lifelines, special treatment, and public subsidies that helped build the empire he now pretends he built alone. It started with Tesla. When Tesla was flailing in its early years, facing financial ruin and failing to meet production goals, who stepped in? The U.S. government. Through a $465 million loan from the Department of Energy, yes, the same federal government Musk often mocks, Tesla was able to survive. Not only survive, but expand, eventually becoming a global brand. But Musk didn't thank the government. He didn't admit that public money gave his company a second chance. Instead, he launched a years-long PR campaign painting himself as a self-made visionary who outsmarted the system, when in reality the system rescued him, and it didn't end there. Crockett moved to SpaceX, another one of Musk's darlings. While it's often described as a private company revolutionizing space travel, what's conveniently left out of the headline is that SpaceX thrives almost entirely because of contracts with NASA, the Department of Defense, and other government entities. These aren't side gigs. They are core revenue streams. Without government money, SpaceX doesn't go to the moon. It doesn't launch satellites. It doesn't test rockets. It doesn't even exist in its current form. And while Musk likes to joke on social media about government inefficiency or corruption, Crockett pointed out that he never turns down the checks. In fact, he actively pursues them, lobbying for contracts, negotiating behind closed doors, and leveraging political connections that most American business owners could never dream of accessing. The irony? Musk will get on Twitter and rant about government handouts one day, and sign a government deal worth $300 million the next. Crockett exposed that duality for exactly what it was, calculated deception. She spoke to the frustration of regular Americans, people who pay taxes every week, who follow the rules, who jump through hoops to get small business loans, health insurance, or student aid. She said, if you've ever waited on hold with the IRS or been denied a student grant, you've felt the weight of bureaucracy. But Elon Musk, he skips the line. He gets ushered into back rooms. And then he has the nerve to act like he's fighting for you. It wasn't just hypocrisy, it was insult. And then she went further. Crockett questioned why, if Musk truly believed in personal responsibility and private enterprise, he continued to accept federal subsidies, tax credits, and exclusive government contracts while simultaneously gutting workforces, cutting union efforts, and outsourcing parts of his production to foreign countries. She called out the fact that Tesla had received generous tax breaks from multiple states, California, Nevada, Texas, all while Musk threatened to move operations if he didn't get what he wanted. Jobs were dangled like bargaining chips. Public funds were extracted with vague promises of economic growth, and the second those promises became inconvenient, Musk moved the goalposts. And what about accountability? Crockett pointed out that while government agencies are audited, reviewed, and held to public standards, Musk's companies operate largely behind closed doors. There are no public hearings for how he spends those taxpayer dollars, no transparency about what's delivered versus what's promised, no consequences when he falls short, just more funding. She brought receipts, statements Musk had made over the years about getting off the government teat, only to follow them up with massive new requests for funding. She read out quotes where Musk blasted welfare programs, then showed documentation of Tesla receiving millions in environmental subsidies, research grants, and consumer rebates. It wasn't just a contradiction, it was a strategy. Crockett made it clear. Musk knew the anti-government image would appeal to a certain audience. He knew it would make him look rebellious, relatable, even heroic. But behind the scenes, he was operating like any other well-connected insider, taking everything he could get while convincing his followers that he was somehow above it. And then came the line that silenced the room. You don't get to attack the government while living off its wallet. You don't get to act like a renegade while building your fortune on the back of working people's tax dollars. And you definitely don't get to preach independence when you've never stopped cashing the checks. That wasn't just a political shot, it was a moral one. Because at the heart of Musk's brand is the illusion of freedom, the illusion that he made it alone, that he rose above the system, when in truth, he mastered the system. And that mastery didn't help everyday Americans, it helped him. And while Crockett was careful not to villainize innovation or entrepreneurship, she made it crystal clear that what Musk was doing wasn't revolutionary. It was manipulation. It was the repackaging of corporate welfare as genius. And the public deserved to know the truth. And the truth stung. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The man who claims to hate the system has been bleeding it dry for years, and as Crockett pointed out, the longer we pretend otherwise, the more we reward the behavior. But Elon Musk wasn't alone in this game. Because next, Crockett was turning her attention back to a man who practically wrote the book on exploiting government power while claiming to fight it, Donald J. Trump. And what she said next would leave even his most loyal supporters questioning the brand he spent decades selling. After pulling back the curtain on Elon Musk's carefully disguised dependence on government money, Jasmine Crockett turned to something even darker, something more corrosive than contracts and more dangerous than hypocrisy. She turned her focus to a man who didn't just exploit the system. He fractured public trust in it for personal gain. Donald Trump's post-presidency wasn't defined by quiet reflection or graceful exit. It was defined by chaos, by conspiracy, and most of all, by profit. And Crockett came prepared with the receipts. She didn't open with emotion. She opened with math. In the weeks following the 2020 election, Trump and his allies raised over $250 million by telling the American people that the election had been stolen. They sent out hundreds of fundraising emails filled with dramatic language: defend the election, stop the steal, emergency donation needed. They framed it as a patriotic duty. But in reality, it was something else entirely, a cash grab, one of the most effective grifts in modern political history. And Crockett laid it bare. That money didn't fund a legal battle. It didn't go toward recounts or investigation teams. It flowed into political action committees under Trump's control, used to fund travel, events, salaries, consultants, and whatever else he wanted to bankroll. It was a shell game where the American people, especially his most loyal supporters, were footing the bill. She said it plainly. This wasn't about integrity. This wasn't about democracy. This was about monetizing outrage. And she was right. Trump had discovered something most politicians only dream of, an audience so emotionally invested in his narrative that he could turn loss into leverage and defeat into dollars. Every time he claimed the election was stolen, it wasn't just political, it was profitable. It kept the donations flowing, it kept the headlines spinning, it kept him relevant. Crockett pointed out how this wasn't a one-time tactic. It was the entire model, a permanent campaign, built on permanent grievance, a cycle of drama and denial that kept his base energized and his pockets full. She reminded viewers that Trump hadn't conceded. Not really. He never admitted the truth because the lie had become more valuable than the facts ever could be. And the damage, it wasn't just emotional, it was institutional. Crockett highlighted how Trump's election conspiracy theories triggered a wave of legislation across the country. States passed new voting restrictions based on fears that were manufactured, not factual. Election officials, poll workers, and even secretaries of state were harassed, doxxed, and threatened. All because one man refused to admit he lost. She brought up stories of Republican election officials, lifelong conservatives, who were hounded out of their jobs simply for telling the truth. And yet Trump continued to double down, not just in speeches, not just in tweets, but in action. He endorsed candidates who repeated the lie. He pressured state legislatures to reverse results. He even called election officials personally, demanding they find votes. Crockett didn't have to dramatize it. Those facts are on the record. What she did was connect the dots and ask the question most people are too afraid to confront. If a man will burn down trust in democracy to raise money and save face, what else would he do if we let him back into power? Then she went further. She reminded the public that this wasn't the first time Trump had used manipulation for financial gain. This was the same man who ran Trump University, which the courts found was so fraudulent it resulted in a $25 million settlement. The same man who pitched Trump steaks and Trump vodka as luxury products, only for them to flop miserably. The same man who declared bankruptcy 6 times and walked away while his contractors, employees, and partners were left holding the bag. It wasn't new. It was a pattern, a long-running scheme where Trump created just enough belief, just enough illusion, to get people to invest financially, emotionally, politically, and then left them with nothing. Only this time it wasn't about beef or vodka. This time it was about democracy, and Crockett delivered one of the hardest-hitting lines of the entire hearing. Trump didn't lose the election. He found a new product to sell, and the product was victimhood. With that one sentence, she reframed the entire narrative. Trump wasn't a wronged patriot, he was a brand manager, selling grievance like merchandise. And the cost wasn't just financial, it was national, because every dollar raised off the lie came at the expense of trust. Trust in elections, trust in institutions, trust in facts. Crockett warned that democracy doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It erodes slowly, one conspiracy at a time. And Trump, with his endless claims of fraud and persecution, was eroding that trust day by day, tweet by tweet, rally by rally. And even as his legal problems mounted, Crockett noted, Trump was still doing it, still fundraising, still spreading the lie, still telling millions of people that they were the victims and that only he could protect them, only he could fix it, only he could be trusted. That's not leadership, Crockett said. That's a cult of personality wrapped in a business model, and the price isn't just your money, it's your ability to see the truth. And she wasn't done yet, because while Trump and Musk had different styles, one brash and chaotic, the other smug and calculated, Crockett made it clear that both relied on the same thing: distraction, misdirection, spectacle. Coming up next, she would expose the playbook they both followed, and how, behind the circus, real damage was being done in plain sight. By this point, Jasmine Crockett had done what few politicians dare to attempt, pulling back the curtain on two of the most influential figures in modern America, and exposing not just their flaws, but the carefully crafted illusions that shielded them. But she wasn't finished, because what came next wasn't just about Musk and Trump as individuals. It was about the playbook they both relied on. Crockett didn't hold back. She called it out for what it was: a blueprint for power built on distraction, disruption, and deception, one that allowed two billionaires to manufacture chaos while quietly securing unprecedented levels of influence. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't randomness. It was deliberate. It was tested. And it was working. She started with a simple question: why do these men always seem to be at the center of controversy, yet always emerge richer, more powerful, and more entrenched than before? The answer? Because the outrage is the point. The noise is the fuel. When Elon Musk posts an unhinged meme or picks a fight with a journalist online, people click. They argue, they share, they laugh. Some rage, others defend. But in all that noise, something far more important is happening. No one's watching the contracts, no one's watching the layoffs, no one's questioning the monopolies. And Musk knows it. Crockett revealed how Musk had turned controversy into camouflage, creating digital firestorms so big they obscured the real-world consequences of his actions. While everyone was arguing about whether Twitter should reinstate a banned account, Musk was gutting moderation teams, dissolving trust and safety boards, and quietly realigning the platform's policies around his personal ideology. And all the while, he was sitting on multi-billion-dollar defense contracts that gave him extraordinary influence over military operations, space technology, and even global internet access. She explained how this wasn't about free speech or innovation. It was about control of platforms, control of narratives, control of which stories get seen and which ones disappear. And Trump? The exact same model. While the media obsessed over every bizarre quote, every petty nickname, every caps-locked Truth Social rant, Trump was building a political machine underneath the noise, a fundraising engine, a legal delay operation, a media apparatus. He used chaos not to distract from weakness, but to create cover for strength. Strength built on fear, misinformation, and absolute loyalty. Crockett described it perfectly. Every time Trump makes headlines for the absurd, he's burying the real headlines that should matter. She brought up how Trump's campaign used outrage as a tool. When the walls were closing in, when indictments loomed or scandals hit, he'd change the subject by saying something outrageous, something that couldn't be ignored. And the media, time and again, played right into it. And while the world was laughing at his spelling errors or reeling from his latest insult, he was filling his rallies with people donating money, signing up for newsletters, and repeating slogans that were designed not to inspire, but to divide. Crockett warned that this cycle had become so effective, so routine, that people stopped realizing it was happening. The public had been conditioned to treat the absurd as entertainment and the dangerous as just another Tuesday. But what happens when that distraction starts to damage institutions? She pointed to how both men have actively undermined public trust in core systems, elections, media, science, government agencies, all while claiming to be the ones defending freedom. They exploit that confusion, they feed it. Because the more chaotic things feel, the more power people are willing to surrender to those who claim to have the answers, even if those answers are lies. Crockett explained that both Musk and Trump had created a new model of leadership, one that didn't rely on competence or policy, but on identity. You weren't just supporting a person, you were joining a tribe. Believing in them became a litmus test for loyalty, not logic. Musk framed himself as the misunderstood innovator fighting a broken system. Trump cast himself as the ultimate outsider, constantly under attack from corrupt forces. But in both cases, Crockett revealed the truth was far more cynical. These men were not outsiders. They are the system. They've simply figured out how to break the rules without being held accountable, by convincing enough people that the rulebook itself is the enemy. She gave example after example of how both men use manufactured outrage to erode scrutiny. Musk would tweet something inflammatory, knowing it would trend, knowing it would distract from the mass firings at Tesla or the safety violations being quietly reported. Trump would stage a chaotic rally on the same day a damaging legal story broke, forcing the press to choose which circus to cover. And the people who pay the price? Not Musk, not Trump, it's the public. The people who lose access to reliable information. The workers laid off in silence. The election officials threatened because of lies. The voters who no longer trust their own system. The taxpayers funding billionaires who claim to hate government while pocketing its contracts. Crockett's voice didn't waver when she said, "We are living through a sleight of hand, and the longer we stare at the distraction, the more power slips through our fingers." She wasn't just delivering a critique, she was issuing a call. A call to pay attention not to what these men say, but to what they do when no one's watching. To stop treating scandals like sideshows and start tracing them back to the real consequences. To stop getting trapped in their performance and start pulling back the curtain. Because the truth is, Trump and Musk don't need to silence their critics. They just need to exhaust them, confuse them, distract them, and by the time the public realizes what's happened, it's already too late. But Crockett wasn't interested in letting it get that far. In her final moments, she was ready to bring everything full circle, to deliver the truth most people had felt in their gut for years but hadn't heard spoken with this kind of clarity. Because beneath all the noise, all the money, and all the manipulation, there was one undeniable fact. They're not playing the game, they're rigging it. And she was about to break that down in her most powerful section yet. By the time Jasmine Crockett reached the final stretch of her testimony, the room had changed, the energy was different. The usual political posturing had evaporated. What remained was a rare silence, a silence built not on confusion, but on confrontation. Because Crockett wasn't just participating in a hearing anymore, she was delivering a moment. And what she said next didn't just shake the table, it flipped it. She leaned into the microphone, not to raise her voice, but to lower the temperature. That's when it hit even harder. With a calmness that cut deeper than anger ever could, she spoke directly into the camera, not as a politician but as a witness, someone who had seen what happens when unchecked power meets unlimited platforms. Let's stop pretending this is about innovation, or patriotism, or free speech. This is about ego. This is about power. And this is about what happens when billionaires start believing they're bigger than democracy. It wasn't a shot in the dark, it was a sniper round aimed straight at the mythologies Musk and Trump had built around themselves. She didn't need cue cards, she didn't need consultants. What she needed, what she had, was something neither of them could buy. Credibility, lived experience, the moral clarity to say what others in that room had been dancing around for years. Elon Musk is not the savior of free speech, he's the gatekeeper of his own echo chamber. Donald Trump is not the voice of the forgotten. He's the architect of a lie so big, it swallowed an entire nation's sense of truth. And the room? You could feel it tighten. Crockett wasn't grandstanding, she was exposing not just the men, but the machine. The media cycles that elevated every provocation. The tech bros who idolized narcissism and called it disruption. The lawmakers who watched democracy buckle and still asked for endorsements. She made it clear these men didn't rise alone. They were enabled. They were protected. And when it suited them, they were ignored. It's easy to laugh when they tweet. easy to mock when they misspeak, but every distraction is a shield. And while we're busy reacting, they're busy rewriting the rules. She then zeroed in on one of the most haunting truths of all, that the chaos wasn't accidental. It was engineered, designed, mass-produced, and broadcasted to millions. It was the foundation of their power, the currency of their influence. They don't need the truth on their side. They just need the timeline. They flood it, they twist it, and they own it. That's not freedom, that's manipulation on a global scale. She paused, just long enough to let it land. Then she turned the mirror toward the rest of the country. And if you've ever wondered how history repeats itself, this is how. Not with tanks in the street, but with tweets in your feed, with slogans louder than facts, with a public too tired to care and a press too addicted to the noise to question the motive. And the room stayed silent, because by now Crockett had moved past criticism. She was delivering a cultural diagnosis, one that left no one untouched. She wasn't just challenging two men. She was challenging an entire nation to look harder, think deeper, and wake up. And then came the moment. The line that would be clipped, shared, and etched into political memory. Power that demands no accountability is not power. It's a threat. And if we're too busy being entertained to see that, we're not citizens, we're spectators. That sentence didn't just summarize her point. It pierced the narrative. It forced a confrontation between the myths we embrace and the truths we ignore. She followed it with a slow, deliberate takedown of both men's brands. Musk, the rebel genius, who silences critics while pretending to champion free speech, who profits off government contracts while bashing the same government that pays him. Trump, the outsider, who had 4 years to prove he was different and used them to enrich himself, divide the country, and build a personal media empire off one big lie. Crockett didn't mince words. You want to know the difference between a leader and a manipulator? A leader tells you the truth even when it costs them. A manipulator tells you what you want to hear, then sends you the bill. And perhaps the most sobering moment of all came when she reminded everyone, especially younger generations, what's at stake. This isn't about left or right. It's not about red hats or blue checks. It's about the future of reality itself. Because when lies become law and spectacle becomes strategy, the truth doesn't just get ignored, it gets erased. There was no performance, no theatrics. Just a cold, clean dissection of how two men had managed to seduce half the country with chaos and distract the other half with denial. Then she stood up. No drama, no fist-pounding, no flourish. Just one last sentence, simple, sharp, final. If holding people accountable makes me the villain in their story, then so be it. I'll wear that with pride. And with that, she walked away. The cameras kept rolling. Reporters scrambled. Pundits began spinning. Musk likely started typing. Trump somewhere was preparing another post. But none of it could erase what had just happened. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't just make headlines. She made history. And in a political world addicted to noise, she delivered something rare, something raw, something real. A reckoning, a line in the sand, and a reminder that truth, when spoken boldly and without fear, can still silence even the loudest empire. By the time Jasmine Crockett walked out of that hearing, something had shifted, not just in the room but in the narrative. The spectacle that usually surrounds Elon Musk and Donald Trump had finally met its match, not in volume or drama, but in precision. She didn't come to play their game, she came to end it. And by the time she was done, the truth stood taller than either of their empires. Because Crockett didn't just expose their failures, she exposed the formula. The way they manufacture chaos, then hide behind it. The way they manipulate patriotism into profit. The way they distract the public with drama while quietly expanding their power, unchecked and unanswered. She didn't call for censorship. She didn't demand their silence, she demanded accountability. And that's what rattled them. Because when the smoke cleared, all that was left was the truth. And it wasn't on their side. This wasn't about left or right. It was about reality, about the danger of confusing wealth with wisdom, noise with leadership, and spectacle with strength. It was a wake-up call, not just for Congress, not just for the media, but for everyone watching. And as Crockett made her final statement and calmly stepped away, there was no need for applause. The silence said it all. Because in a political landscape where lies go viral, distractions dominate, and billionaires are treated like prophets, Jasmine Crockett proved one thing loud and clear: truth still hits harder, and when spoken with clarity, conviction, and courage, it doesn't just echo, it ends the show.